Hey, how's it going? This is Coffee with Ryan. This is our first live stream doing this. We did sort of a beta test of this sort of format last week internally, last Friday, with some of the serverless guru people. And it's kind of an interesting format. And the reason it's interesting is one, I think, I have to start the day with coffee, so that's the most important thing. But also, I feel like informal conversation is sometimes pretty hard to find. I know that we have tons of different podcast options out there. I know that also with Serverless Guru, we have a podcast called Talking Serverless, where we're releasing new episodes all the time. However, it's a little bit more structured, and there's much more of a QA sort of format. The goal of this was sort of experiment with the new format, which is almost starting with a blank slate and then just seeing how the conversation develops. Obviously, since this is the first time that we're doing this, the expectation is pretty low, just because we have to create all that conversation, ourselves. But I think the way to kick it off is to give a general overview about myself and my story, and then maybe we can sort of jump into different things from there. So my story starts off in Texas, where I started to learn about programming, and I heard a rumor about a code school, and this idea that you could go to a code school to then become a software developer, potentially get a job at the Big Four, the Googles, the Amazons of the world. And so I basically just reached out to them immediately and said, "Hey, I'm willing to do this." I had family that was in Portland, Oregon, and I thought, "All right, this is worth it. Let me take a backpack. Let me try to get into this." They accepted me, and I left pretty much everything that I had in Texas, which was not a lot of stuff. At that time, I was only 22. And the biggest thing for me was leaving probably my gaming computer. And that's been a very big part of my life since then. Previous to this, from probably 16 years old, 14 years old, all the way to probably 20 years old, that like 6 year stretch, or even probably towards 22 before I moved. I had been playing video games likely, 10 hours a day, 12 hours a day, to be honest. If I wasn't at school, I was playing video games, and I started to develop myself into, a pretty good Halo 3 player back in the day, doing, competitive matches and trying, go into like major league gaming events. And I never got to like a professional level with it, but that was always the goal. And so then when a game came out called World of Warcraft, I kind of saw an opportunity to develop. Well, it kind of happened naturally, to be honest. It didn't start off with like I'm going to turn this into a job or do this for money or something. But the I loved the game, and I loved competitive game playing on it. And so I would do like 10v10s, and we'd have real time communication. Battlegrounds, if anybody knows that. And you can imagine 10 different people, tons of different configurations of like healers and all sorts of stuff. We'd all like clash. We ran up the ranks there and got pretty high into the world rankings. And that skill then transferred over to doing sort of like 2v2 matches, where I would do it for money and so on. I don't know how the legality of all that, but regardless, it was an interesting time, and that was sort of a precursor. So then when I moved to go to code school and I left my gaming computer, I mean, I was leaving pretty much my whole life for the past like 6 to 8 years, and I only brought a laptop with me and a backpack with some clothes, and then I pretty much lived inside the code school and lived inside of programming that entire time, and was working data entry and so on at the airport, just to pay rent, and taking school online for programming as well to help pay for bills and all that stuff too. Fast forward, I learned about serverless during that code school. The first video that I watched about serverless was actually from a cloud guru. No association to serverless guru in terms of naming and all that. I don't. Somehow it lined up, and we ended up having a similar name. But so a cloud guru had a video from Ryan Kroonenberg that spoke about serverless is the future. And I heard that, and at the time I had almost no programming experience to be able to understand what that meant in terms of the scale of everything. And I just knew I was up and coming in this field. I didn't have a lot of background in programming in general for, like half decade or something. And so I wanted to be on the forefront of, innovation, the forefront of AWS, the forefront of cloud, and serverless was, kind of that gateway, right? And so then I had to figure out, okay, well, what does serverless mean, right? Because I was starting from ground zero. So what does serverless mean? How do I use it? What do I build with it? And my entry point to it was actually Amazon Alexa. I started building Amazon Alexa skills, and I released a Android app to the App Store during that code school as well for train commutes inside of Portland, Oregon. I don't think you can still find it, but the name of it was Wise Commute. Also, I'm selling the domain names. If anybody wants to buy wisecommute.com, feel free to take it off my hands. I don't know what the listing price is, but or best offer, right? So I released that, and then I used all this experience from building the Alexa skills, and then also releasing the Android app for train arrivals, understanding how API development works and how to work with APIs. And then I started kind of a mini startup right after the code school finished, where I was trying to do something similar to Dynobase, where in Dynobase, I feel like I'm saying it the right way, it's basically a UI for DynamoDB. And the reason where my idea came from there was I wanted to create DynamoDB tables, or let people at the code school create DynamoDB tables without knowing about AWS, because I could see a gap very clearly between the people in the code school that hadn't heard about AWS or serverless and their ability to build real world applications, and then my ability with the same programming knowledge, and I could build all sorts of stuff, Android apps and Alexa skills, and I would have been able to build website backends and all that stuff. So thinking about this platform and having this sort of North Star, I started learning about Cognito and building API gateway APIs. And naturally, about 2 months later, I got a email from a recruiter for Nike. And I went there and did the interviews, and somehow got accepted in there. I say somehow because, man, the imposter syndrome that I had at the time was absolutely insane. I mean, I'm coming into Nike, which I've known the brand since I was born, and it's always been held up from the Michael Jordans of the world, and all the sports competitiveness and just what they represent on that front. Also, skateboarding for me has been a big part of my life. So the Stefan Janowski and all that stuff. So getting there, being in person, sitting in front of these Nike engineers and them asking me questions and asking me about Android development and JavaScript and API gateway development and AWS. Weirdly enough, I guess this was just I was very early on in this. And so I matched the job description. I had enough of the knowledge to be able to build these APIs, and I had enough of the authentication side to be able to have those conversations. I ended up getting the job, which was amazing. And I was inside the innovation engineering department. And this is where it's, weirdly enough, they accepted me, because the innovation engineering department at an organization like Nike, you have the Nike mothership, and then you have a small subgroup of those engineers that are working on the new products that are unreleased. So being part of that was very much like every single day I could feel the imposter syndrome daily, because there was people that were there that had released iPhone apps that went #1 on the App Store over and over. They had released like 6 of them. Just this one person that was like working a couple cubicles from me, or they were open cubicles, of course. And then they had a cafeteria in there. They had a soccer fields on the campus. There was a pond. If you look up the Beaverton Nike World Headquarters and just look at the campus, it really was like I did get to like a Google. The stuff that we worked on, I can't get into specifics, but it was, there's machine learning components. There's definitely serverless components. And what I realized while I was there is, wow, the difference between my only a couple years of programming experience and others is a huge gap, right? So I had to figure out, what do I need to do to be able to level myself up, to be able to match the people that are inside of Nike in the innovation engineering department that have 10 years of programming experience and so on. The knowledge they have in their head, that's going to obviously be hard to replicate. There was no AI systems back then, like a ChatGPT you could ask. So what I did was I just asked to, have like code samples of people that are very well liked and experienced inside the organization. And then I used those as sort of my baseline to understand programming at the level that it needed to be to succeed at Nike. And then the thought process was, if I could replicate what these people were doing inside of their code, then I could actually turn that into, potentially a successful career there. The infrastructure as code piece and the serverless piece, it really became apparent that this was something extremely unique, because out of all these people inside the innovation department, the ones that understood AWS or serverless was, only a handful, right? So compared to people that have 10 years of Java experience, or 5+ years of like Node.js at that point, and tons of Python experience, these are computer science, master degrees, all sorts of stuff. The part that separated me from them was just the serverless and infrastructure as code piece. And of course, me wanting to survive, have a job, and be able to grow my career, I just tripled down on serverless and infrastructure as code and kind of made that my niche. Fast forward, I helped a lot of different teams there, like with their infrastructure as code, understanding serverless and how to build that. Fast forward again, I got hired to be basically the sole consultant of a serverless consulting company, which at the time was pretty much, just that company that was a serverless only consulting company. And then, I worked at a bunch of different teams and companies before eventually starting Serverless Guru. And yeah, I mean, it's a long journey. I'm sure there's tons of other stuff to get into there, but everybody knows the history over the past 4+ years. We ran into a global pandemic. That was a huge one for Serverless Guru. I was also an extremely young founder. I would argue I'm still a very young founder, and the information that I needed to be able to go from being a solo freelance developer to then being able to scale out a company at all, just massive amounts of information that I didn't know. So trying to learn that, trying to just focus on whatever the next most painful thing is, and then also following sort of a personal mantra that I have, which is don't be so hard on yourself, right? Because as you can imagine, I started getting contracts, I started including other people in. I don't have all of the knowledge about how the rest of the back office side works, the accounting side works, the tax side works, etc. And now all of a sudden I'm solving, 10+ different problems completely unrelated to tech and to infrastructure as code and serverless. But we survived, we got through it, we're still going. And I'm pretty happy to be where I'm at today. And yeah, so now I won't say where I'm at physically and geolocation and space and so on, but I've been learning Spanish for a while now, and I'm hoping that this is going to represent another chapter in my life and my career, where I can use that Spanish to potentially re-bring up a lot of the content and serverless learnings and AWS articles and so on that I've wrote in the past. For reference, I think I've probably wrote like 50+ articles on serverless and AWS, and I made a course called the Serverless Zero to Paid Professional course, which is like 90 videos. And so all that's in English. It's also from earlier on in my career. So now with more context, more well-rounded information about all the different things that go on inside of a larger software or a software firm, but also one that works inside of even larger software firms, I think the Spanish aspect and try to mix those things together, it represents a really cool thing. So regardless, that is me. I appreciate y'all joining for Coffee with Ryan. I apologize for the long-winded thing there. But yeah, so I think another things that I wanted to get into was sort of chatting with others. I think we had maybe some stuff in the comments already, so I can kind of check it out and see. What kind of coffee? Well, for me, I've got an Americano. I used to be a caramel. I think it's a caramel frappuccino, or not frappuccino. It's like what is like the most basic drink that people talk about at Starbucks or something, like a caramel macchiato or something like this. So I've now switched to dirt coffee, and I've been drinking dirt coffee for a while now, and I love it. I think that it's very it reconnects me with nature every day. So and then what is it? We have Jonathan drinking tea. Okay. No, that's not cheating. I think actually my one of my friends is doing a tea sort of cleanse, a caffeine cleanse. They've been drinking very heavy loads of caffeine, and now they're switching to like a green tea. and it's supposed to be a little bit cleaner, I guess. Yeah, the serverless course here that Joao mentioned, it's on training.serverlessguru.com. And so you can take it. If you want to email us, just send an email to like info@serverlessguru.com, ask us for a coupon code, and then we can give you a coupon code for the course. Just because it's a bit older now, so I want to make sure you have a good experience. On that topic, we have another gigantic course coming out that's been in the production for, oh my gosh, like a year now, and it's called the Serverless Machine Learning course. There may be a more fancy name when it actually gets released, but you'll learn how to build serverless APIs and actual real projects using a lot of the machine learning aspects that are now becoming way more popular with the sort of AI revolution we're in. So, and that's done by Cyril from our side. So shout out to Cyril. Let's see, what is Dirt Coffee? Well, Dirt Coffee is, straight from the bean, they just pull it out of the dirt, they put it in there, they grind it up. I don't know the logistics of it. Unfortunately, I do not have a caffeine maker inside of my house. I have a coffee pot, but I don't know how the rest of the process works. So let's see. What are your thoughts about AWS CDKs, CloudFormation versus Terraform? Well, I think first off, I think all of them have a place, and it comes down to the specific team. So to dial that back and think about it, the most important thing for a business, and I think for all people, is to ask, what do you want, right? So if you're a business and you're looking to adopt something, or you're a development team inside of an existing company that makes products, and you're trying to understand which way do we go, I think you first have to look at, what do you want to accomplish, right? What are you doing all this for, right? Because it's infrastructure as code or anything in isolation, it's not enough, right? So if you know that we're trying to release a product in the next 3 months and your team only knows Terraform, I think it would be probably crazy to even talk about making a switch. However, if you don't have a product release in 3 months, or it's not related to your infrastructure as code choice, and you're looking for something more long-term, again, I think you have to go back to the team that you have existing, and then also the historical information about that infrastructure as code and how much has been modified or manipulated. Just no conspiracy, I think, on the infrastructure as code side, but how much has been done and updated, and how innovative they're being with it. Is it just something that they had previous success with in the past, or are they constantly making updates to it? And so for CDK, I think a lot of the industry is moving that direction. There is sort of two camps, and I think you kind of laid it out there. Do you use this CloudFormation side, or do you use the CDK? And for me, I'm probably going to lean towards frameworks that lean on CloudFormation. This is partially because I guess I'm an old veteran of the CloudFormation side in terms of serverless. And so I still feel the most confident having this kind of compiler of CloudFormation to take in my inputs, which are static, and then be able to consistently have a pipeline for those deployments and handle all the guardrails for me. That's still a really big thing that I think is good, partially because of my own experience, and then also seeing larger development teams, right? Because what you find in any development team is a varying level of skill in terms of programming, in terms of practices, but not just the technical side. You also have people that are more passionate, more ambitious. They spend their weekends researching, trying to upgrade their skill set, et cetera. And so you have like a very high difference in terms of their ability to use that framework in the proper way. And I think that's where the guardrails kind of comes in pretty nicely. So I think if the organization was already using Terraform and they wanted to start playing around with more serverless workloads, then I would probably still recommend to use something that, like a serverless framework or AWS SAM, just because the concepts transfer pretty well. And then also, if you're focused only on AWS, obviously, that's a really big important note. If you need to make deployments to other platforms, I would still almost say to use the framework that's geared towards AWS and then leverage Terraform for the rest of it. There is sort of this one-size-fits-all mentality that I think the tech community has, where it's basically I only want to use this one thing for everything, right? But I think in reality, it's much more nuanced. And so I would use Terraform for any other cloud deployments. I would use a different framework for the other ones. And I would probably lean towards serverless frameworks based on my past experience. There's obviously been updates to the framework there. If you're worried about that, you can obviously lean into AWS SAM. And then if you have the right team and the right mentality, and they're looking forward to experimenting with new stuff and trying to move faster, then I think CDK is the right option. However, I think that you need to understand your own internal team first and each individual on that team. And it may be something that to start with CDK, maybe you isolate a small team of a couple of those developers and you let them play around with it, build up the practices, and then you slowly scale that out. Because, like I said, those guardrails are nice, right? When you have a team of varying skill level, or you have different vendors that you're working with that bring in a bunch of different developers with different backgrounds and so on, it's nice to be able to say, follow this exact thing, and you're going to get the same result every time, and not asking them to sort of write it from scratch each time. Oh, on that note, though, there is the side of layering with CDK, which is super cool. And you can create these really nice layers of abstraction. And so then you can expose a very simplified version to the rest of your team, and then have one central team, which is managing, sometimes they call them like the cloud excellence team, I've heard before. And it's basically just a group of a mix of like DevOps and developers who are setting the foundation for a much larger organization. So they'll create the templates, they'll create the structures, and then they'll expose those to the rest of the developers to use. Where I've seen that fall down is after the initial creation of it, because obviously when you create something like that, everything kind of works. But then as things go on, that's where all the messy complexity comes in, and you need to have a procedures and somebody oversight on updating all of those things, and who is able to push in new updates. What is the process for that? And that gets into all the logistics that are unrelated to, even the infrastructure as code choice. But still something to consider when you're sort of weighing all this out. How much do you want to own on your end versus, on something else? Let's see. Great question. Thanks, John. Hello, Ryan. What were the most significant challenges when you started Serverless Guru? Oh man, so I actually did this weird thing when I was starting Serverless Guru where I took photos at weird moments. I have a photo where I think I was inside the bank when I first opened the company bank account, and I was just, I was probably like ear to ear smiling. I was like, hey, we're doing it. We're taking on the world, And then I have another one where I'm sitting on a curb and I had just had to let go of somebody for the first time. And holy crap, that was like so emotional for me. And I didn't know how to have the conversation. I didn't really know what to say. I had heard that, you probably shouldn't give like too specific level of feedback to people as they're being, let go, obviously, because they can't really change anything, and all it could potentially do is open up like arguments and a bunch of other stuff. And if it's a clean break, then just make it a clean break, So that was very tough for me. I also had another moment where I was on top of a parking garage in Portland, Oregon for about 4 hours. And I was talking on the phone to, gosh, I don't even remember who I was talking to, maybe multiple people. And I had taken on a project from, I won't give any details, and I don't think there's any possible way, but who knows, the world is weird. This could come back around or something. But it was a project where I got asked to scope the work, and me being, the inexperienced founder that I was, or just freelance person that I was, I asked, or I didn't ask, but I said, I don't know, maybe 10 hours to 80 hours, somewhere between like this range, right? And they said back to me, okay, 10 hours. And I was like, oh, okay. I kind of like, I put myself into a wall, and then I just sort of accepted it. I went way over budget on it, trying to build it. I found out there was some like legality issues with some of the things where it could be legal, but I felt that I don't have the budget to hire a legal person, like a legal expert, to understand this. and I don't want to be responsible for releasing something that, potentially causes more expense later. So I came to the decision after 4 hours in that parking garage, I'm going to stop work and give a full refund. And that was tough, because it was very early on. And now I think back on it kind of silly. I'm like, ah, it wasn't that big of a deal. Like I probably could have just called him and like, hey, I overscoped it. This isn't working. I'm going to give you a refund. I appreciate it. And if anything changes in the future, let me know. And it probably would have been that easy. So I think early on, everything felt like a mountain and everything felt extremely hard. And what's weird about it is that the challenges that come always feel almost insurmountable. And one of my favorite books from Ryan Holiday is called The Obstacle is the Way. And it's basically the idea that through those obstacles, you actually get the most growth. So I think at one point, I wouldn't say I'm like a masochist. Is that how it is that? I don't know if that's the right word. Where I saw the challenges or I saw these like, oh man, this is like, what am I going to do? And I was like, and I, because of those books that I read, I was like, oh, this is it. This is the moment that's actually going to allow me to like grow more. So there was sort of a level of, I would sometimes be able to recognize sometimes in the moment that actually this obstacle that I'm being faced with is just like every other obstacle that I faced previously. And with time, we will overcome it. And when we do, it will no longer feel like an obstacle anymore, for that specific area. And yeah, so that's some of the challenges, a lot of them. And yeah, thanks for the question, Rafa. Yeah, I agree with the use, the platform's native product. Yeah, for sure. Shout out to Art Code. Yeah, art.codes. Give them some love. Thanks, Paul, for shouting that out. Multiples, all developers estimates by PI. Okay, good note. Something interesting is I have a book here in my library that needs to be expanded now. Called Ask Your Developer from the Twilio CEO, and it's a very interesting book. It talks about the idea of exactly what the title says, talking to your developers to understand product vision and product direction and where you should spend time in and where you shouldn't. I think the same way we see it with, developers, operations, QA, and there's these silos, right? And it's like, no, you're a QA, you couldn't possibly have input for development, right? And that's obviously extremely toxic. So don't do that. But the ask your developer side is, hey, the people that are making this stuff, the ones that are actually building it and constructing it, they actually know a lot more than just, hitting their hands on a keyboard, right? And so if you actually talk to them, there's a lot that you can gain about what this product could do, what market it could hit. And I can personally attest to this. At Serverless Guru, we have very, very talented, world-class people from around the world in software development and architecture. However, we also have world-class people about almost every topic, right? And so a lot of times I found myself having to just go back to the team and be like, hey, this is what I'm sort of thinking. Does this make any sense? And there's people that have software development in marketing, software development in sales, software development in IoT, and they all have inputs that are extremely valuable. And we try to practice that every day at Serverless Guru of talking to the team, and especially trying to encourage clients to speak more with their developers and give them a seat at the table, right? Don't create the roadmap without including your developers in. It's crazy. They're going to be the ones that do the work. If it doesn't make sense, catch it early, adjust, and your product delivery is going to be much smoother and better. Yeah. Masochist. Yeah. That's the word of the day. That and dirt coffee. I don't know. Hey, Philippe. Thanks for the awesome party at reInvent. I hope you guys are doing great. Thanks, man. Yeah, I haven't seen you for a bit. It was so fun at reInvent. For those that don't know, we sponsored, co-sponsor, not, I wouldn't say co-sponsor. We were a sub-sponsor to the main sponsor, Momento, at Omnia nightclub. And super cool. very swanky. It was like the first time that I wore a suit in public, so that was very fun. I'm very used to wearing, zip up hoodies and things like that. Not here because where I'm at is tropical, so it's there's way too much sun. So I've got a nice linen shirt on today because I'd be literally sweating like crazy, and I've got AC blowing, so that helps too. But this was a really cool moment for us at Serverless Guru because even for the ones at the team that couldn't make it, just because it felt so real, and I think Philippe you would probably agree, like it felt so real being there, surrounded by all of these people from the space, like the Faras of the world and the Sheen Bristles of the world, and so on, Jeremy Daly, etc. And all of them being in one place. And it really felt like if you're in the serverless space and you're in this one location, you're surrounded by like the most influential people, Joan Zachariah, all that stuff too. So it was pretty amazing. And shout out to our friends at Antstack as well. I had a good conversation with them too, and they're great. So about coffee, okay, Nespresso, extra shot of caffeine. I love my Nespresso maker. However, buying those pods is kind of a hassle, right? So I I think there's like a reusable one. I just haven't ordered it yet. What I was doing is I was using the pod and then I would cut the rest of the plastic out and then I would put some coffee beans in there or like the ground coffee and I would just rerun it like that. And the coffee, not that great, but if you're in a pinch and you need some caffeine and all you have is used pods, you can just snip it off and actually use it that way, which is kind of interesting. So shout out to Nespresso. I think it's a really big thing in Brazil. Will, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like a quick story about this. We tried to do a giveaway. Jonathan knows this full well, and our head of marketing, and we were like, okay, we're gonna do this giveaway. We're gonna send it, all this stuff. And I don't think that we fully knew the tax implications or of like sending things around. And for those that don't know, I believe if you send something into Brazil, wait, maybe I'm wrong on this. There is 100% tax. So if you bought the Nespresso and it wasn't sold, I guess, inside of Brazil, I don't know. I can't speak to it. I'm going way past my field of expertise. So Nespresso's good. It's super quick. You should buy one. And that's all I can say. Drinking mud water. I would love to hear about that. I don't know if you want to jump on, but I would love to know what type of mushrooms are you putting into your coffee, and it's only 9 a.m. for me, so hopefully, like the lion's mane variety, I don't know if you want to jump in or not, but I can add you in. Can you hear us?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, hey, welcome to the stream.
Hello. So the mud water contains a bunch of mushrooms. I'll read them off for you. It's
Okay.
chaga, reishi, lion's mane, cordyceps.
Hmm.
What does this one say? And then it's got a bunch of different other stuff like organic cacao, organic spice blends, and then organic black tea powder.
Hmm. And what's the effects like? What are the health effects of this mushroom coffee are like? How does it have like
So
those things or?
it's all adaptogens, so it's like supposed to like open up your mind and stuff like that,
Hmm.
and kind of like I mean they're better at describing it on their website, but
Okay.
basically it's supposed to really kind of open up your body. It's supposed to be a healthier way of taking caffeine. It's more natural to wake up the I guess I don't know how to describe it, you know what I mean, but it's kind of like waking yourself up on a more biological level instead of a caffeine mind spike level.
Do you feel like it's a smoother sort of on ramp to feeling like caffeinated, or do you feel like is it much sharper? Is it way less than drinking like a normal a
I would
normal?
say it's way less, but longer lasting, kind of like throughout the day. You know what I mean?
Okay.
So you don't
Okay.
you don't get that like spike where you're like, whoa, I'm hyped up on caffeine. but throughout the day, you're like, "Well, I feel pretty good. I've got enough energy to get through the day without feeling like I'm going to crash." The big thing is the crash.
I see. Okay.
You don't have the crash, but yeah, I mean, you should look into it. It's pretty cool. It's also healthier.
Oh, what brand?
It's literally called mud water.
Oh, it's called Mudwater.
Yeah. So the one that I have is the masala chai. So it's the blend of the chai tea is a black tea, ginger, cardamom, clove, nutmeg, and black pepper.
Oh, wow.
And then it's got all those different mushrooms in it that do different things. But it's got a lot of crazy benefits. It's a single tablespoon scoop in hot water. I add a dab of honey,
Hmm.
and I mean it's pretty awesome.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, so check out Mudwater. I was just looking at their website. It's
Yeah,
apparently if you drink this as well, you can do crazy calisthenic.
yeah, yeah. There's a lot of stuff where people are like, "I've been drinking this, and since I started drinking this, I've opened 17 companies," and it's like, okay, but like I said, there's a lot of hype around
There
it.
we go.
It's an alternative. That's the big thing
Okay.
about it. It's like get away from the caffeine, you know,
Yeah, I love it.
away from big corporations putting the chemicals in your stuff. That's
Yeah,
that's the big one. All
100%.
right.
Yeah, thanks for jumping on and talking about it.
Yeah, I don't know much more about it. I'm gonna jump out of here before I
All
get
right.
too crazy with it.
Thanks, Tyler. I also looked it up and it says that, yeah, stress, anxiety, fatigue, overall well-being. So yeah, super cool. So check out Mudwater. That's cool. Let's see. Believe in Serverless community event was amazing. Yeah, it totally was, Jonathan. That was great. Yeah, I think it was one of the highlights for me was definitely, um, I don't think there's any videos out there, but maybe Philippe knows, Jonathan knows, a couple Will knows. I was dancing quite a bit, I believe, in my suit. This is why I can't have a suit. I like dancing too much, and I believe what happened is I had got this suit only for this event, pretty much, and like the last day of reInvent, and then we did that. We had tons of fun. It was awesome. And then I went to go get food afterwards at Raising Cane's, which is, actually, fun fact, the fast food restaurant that I worked at a long time ago in Texas. And I went to go grab the food and it fell onto my suit. So it didn't even last 24 hours, and the thing was completely, messed up. And yeah, and till today, there are still grease stains on that food. So unfortunate for me, but fortunate for y'all because yeah, you get to hear about my misery. Let's see, imagining the mushroom folks from Last of Us. That's funny. I didn't see this. I don't. The Last of Us it's a TV show. Okay. Jonathan, you want to add in your expert opinion about The Last of Us?
I was like looking at a different stream, same stream. I mean, the one that I'm on right now, but like on a different, like on the YouTube, and I see myself pop up. So I was like, oh God. Hey guys. Basically, The Last of Us is a video game series and recently a TV show. So feel free to go watch that or play that. I don't know if anyone plays or watches, video game content, but definitely recommend that one. I think it won something recently, and if not, it definitely should win something. Last of Us Part 2 coming to PS5, I think, coming soon. So if anyone has one of those, I was just, for those who don't know anything about The Last of Us, I guess this is why I was brought on. They have these, I guess, have you ever heard of like the ants that get taken over by like cordyceps or like by like fungus that like, zombifies them? That's basically The Last of Us is the plot of if that happened to humans. So, drink your mud water and do not get infected by the cordyceps. But I'm feeling like Tyler's mud water is like the first step to that. You know what I mean? I mean, like, yeah, exactly. Zombie ants, Joel. Yeah, right. So I don't know. The mud products may be, maybe something sinister. You brought up conspiracies earlier. Maybe I'm making up my own now. Ooh, okay, there we go.
Oh, hey.
Well, hello. Yeah, right. Feeling good. Feeling good about this. Hey guys, maybe I should hide my lobster bakeware dish right up here. I don't know if that's safe for work, guys. So I'm gonna bring my camera back down.
Nice.
Um,
Good save.
I'm just gonna, since I'm here, I'm just gonna throw out something random. I know Paul recently went to, I think, like a dev meetup this past week. And maybe had some perspective or some thought about that. Do you mind if I hop off and bring on Paul?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, Paul. I'm bringing you on. Ready or not?
Hey.
Hey, hey.
Okay, he's ready. Perfect.
Hey,
Much
everybody.
readier than I was. Yeah, that's perfect. Hi.
I'm a professional, you know.
I know. I look away for 1 second. I'm on the camera. Oh, it always happens that way.
All right, tell us your story, Paul.
Oh, yeah. I just wanted to mention, like, I go to a lot of the different community meetups in the area for IT and development. So, I was at a DevOps and platform engineering meetup, and the presentation was on this thing called OpenStack, and it's basically where this company called Open Metal provisions private clouds on demand from their data center. And he goes through all the demo, and it's like spinning up real, like, raw, like, metal servers, bare metal servers from their data center. And it just reinforced, like, every time I try to talk about cloud or like serverless, I'm awkwardly like 1 foot in app dev and 1 foot in platform infra. And I always feel like there's a weird divide there that we're always having to bridge. I wanted to get your thoughts, Ryan, on kind of where we are now, because I feel like I've been doing this for so long now and it still hasn't converged, and I'm like, what is this? Like, what are we still really talking about?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I don't know. The more time that goes on, I feel like the less I talk about serverless and the more I talk about like productivity or about like what your actual goal is of doing all this. And I think maybe it's just the maturity and seeing how slow everything moves. But yeah, I mean, it's hard, right? We've gone to conferences and we've tried to talk to people, and they hear serverless and they're thinking about the OpenStack or Open Metal sort of example you gave, where they're trying to find a way to optimize their data center setup in their bare metal servers, and you're like, man, it's like this is almost like a different planet. But why? It's been here for so long, like it. I think API Gateway was released in like 2016. And I would argue by 2017 or like early 2018, et cetera, like it was possible to build pretty performant APIs, especially for stuff that wasn't getting like heavy usage or needed to have an instant response. You could already use serverless all the way back then. And if you actually looked at your entire application and you kind of split it between it, you really don't need those subs, like the tiniest of fractional responses and so on for 99% of what you're doing, because your customers don't see it. And all those background processing elements that you just throw into this server configuration and you just say, okay, it'll run here because this is the way that we do it. And we'll just run it 24/7 and let another team worry about billing and all that. I think it's, I don't know.
I don't know. I wanted to open it up because I was, from that point of view, I was thinking like these organizations, they clearly see their use of compute as like, they have to, when they say they have a platform team and their job, like DevOps job, is to handle just operating the software, right? And so in the example that they were showing, they were also talking about like inside of a Kubernetes cluster, you have this other app that attaches sidecar pods to every web server pod to intercept the traffic so that you can monitor everything. And I was like, well, like, why are you like, do they keep adding more and more proxies in front of the containers, and it keeps separating the people who are writing the application from the people who are operating it, when what we do is special because we kind of do it all together, right? And I just don't understand like how these organizations really like want to separate. Like this is platform, and now these set of engineers, their whole job is to create the like a cloud interface, right?
Yeah, I think
Where
I have
did that
an
come from?
answer. I think I have an answer which is like not. I think it's based on people's jobs exist for certain people because of the experience they have and where the industry came from. And those people, they didn't die, they're still in the workforce and they still have a set of knowledge and they're still able to communicate, and there is still, you know, optimizations that you can make from running your own server inside of your office to then doing something a little bit more abstract, and you're still going to see some gain from that. And so I feel like that's kind of where it's at. It's the people that still exist inside the industry that are continuing to push that. It's just because, you know, it's sort of the historical side of where it is. And you know, we all know as developers, we all have to be constantly learning every single day, and it gets very tiring. You can get burnt out pretty quick as well, because every new change that comes out that's an existential crisis, you know, you sort of have to fully process and understand. And for others that, you know, like if I was selling, you know, I don't know, Kubernetes or something, or maybe not Kubernetes, maybe that's still too modern. If I was selling something that's been done hundreds of thousands of times, millions of times, everybody understands it. It's what the industry has been. It's what people at like an enterprise level are used to. The conversations are very easy to have, because you have this existing, you know, configuration that supports it inside of that company. When you start introducing something that's new, that brings people together, which I thought was funny when you said it, because we were talking about mushroom coffee earlier, and I was thinking like, oh, what company that talks about this also talks about other topics, and probably mushroom coffee is like a checkbox, you know. So if anybody has like a nice little was it bingo card, I think we're checking through it. And so when you bring in those new concepts into an existing organization, you now have all these new friction points and these opposition points, and you're going like head to head against people that need to like exist or have to exist inside that organization. And so there's kind of a technical side to it, but there's also a much more like soft skills, human side of it. And I've seen personally, you know, being dropped into a technical operations team at a healthcare company, being like doing all this serverless stuff, and they're nowhere near that. You know, they have like beeper duty. They get beeped to increase the RDS connections and so on, and then sort of being like a challenging, like not trying to be, but just my presence inside of this group, being a consultant from the outside who is pushing something that's, you know, extremely different than how things are done. You know, what about like automatic connection, you know, scaling up, right? Not having that beeper, not, you know, needing those things, or having integrations like Slack and so on, where you can get those alerts based on like broken pipelines, or have automatic rollbacks and not need somebody to press a button. What happened was I saw people, you know, immediately question my credentials. They're like, who are you? Run through the give me the step-by-step of the OAuth authentication process, you know, like off the top of your head, you know. And the problem was the guy that was doing it, he had the most experience inside the organization. He had built pretty much everything that they were running their entire company on, and they made that guy feel like he was not needed, and he was sort of like the old guard. And the problem is that he went, okay, fine, and he left. And so everybody was scrambling immediately. And the thought process was, oh, wow, there's a lot more going on than anybody knew. And it seemed like maybe this guy actually had a bunch of scripts and stuff that like he had, which ran and did a bunch of configurations and generated all these reports and all this stuff. And he had built up this entire knowledge set of where all of the bodies were. And then because of how the organization tried to introduce the change, they started isolating those people. They didn't bring them into the conversation. And as a result, you know, you're the people with the most domain experience that can actually help make sure this new change doesn't just go well, but actually succeeds. They kind of knock them out, and it was a lot of scrambling. So yeah, that would be my long form answer of
No,
why
that
it's
makes a lot of sense. IT architectures reflect the organizational, structure as well. Like
Mm,
if you're gonna make a hard separation on duties and departments that are strict on this, that, and the other, it's gonna show in your deployment process as well.
yeah, I wanted
That's
to bring
cool.
up this one here from John, which is when the only tool you have is a hammer, everything in the world looks like a nail. I love that quote. I've heard it a couple times. Thank you for flagging it down because I'm definitely going to mark it so I can say it to people too. But yeah, the bare metal side of this is that. And yeah, what are your thoughts on that, Paul?
Oh man, the more I don't have a traditional degree in engineering or mathematics or computer science, but in order to do this job well and perform at the level that we do, I have basically given myself like a little mini computer science degree. And like just learning about how computers work in general, like the physical process, like blows my mind and makes me want to use abstractions even more, right? Like really, because the people that are against higher level abstractions say bare metal only. They'll say like, well, these developers, they come out and they do these programs, they have no idea how anything underneath works. And that's just kind of flippant, right? Like they just dismiss abstraction as a like almost as like a moral failing. Like you're lazy if you use
Mm,
these tools. And it blows my mind because like they have to sit on top of abstractions. Like they're not magnetizing, needle heads by hand, right? So that's how I feel about it. Like, sure, if you really need the full control over, a processor or a set of processors, fine, like go ahead and do that. But I know how intense that is. Like I don't have to prove to anybody that I know how intense it is. I'm going to go ahead and use, you know, the highest level of tooling that I can.
mhm. Yeah, no, I completely agree. Yeah, it's a rabbit hole for sure. It made
Mhm.
me think of the last we did an internal one of these last week, and Almir, who's here as well, he was flagging down the robotic side, and that we're surrounded by robots every day. And I don't know why, like it's so easy to forget this, and that's why it's probably so easy to forget the layers that are underneath as well. It's like when you in the example that Almir gave was if a little kid with like a toy controller and operating like a little RC car. That's like magic, man. There's a signal flying through, like you can't see it, it's just connecting to it. And all of a sudden, like this thing is rolling around, and it's like that's the most sci-fi thing that like we just sort of went, no, that's just how an RC car and a remote work, and we
Yep.
just kind of can take it for granted. But I think to be able to if when you understand like what your goal is, what you actually want to do, then you might be looking more towards the abstractions, as many abstractions as possible, because I think it's very scary, and I've definitely had to encounter this, where I was introduced for a talk where I was going to talk about serverless at a DevOps meetup, and the first thing they said was, "Okay, Ryan's coming on stage to talk about serverless, and hopefully not why it's going to replace everybody's job."
Oh
And
man.
and it was like, oh man, like take the wind out of me, right before I get on the microphone. And it was kind of interesting because that's where I think I was like fully faced with this crowd full of people that were sort of looking at me being like, are you trying to eliminate our job right now? But the reality is, if you look at the jobs that were being created as the tech boom has happened from like the early 2000s to now, I mean, there's so many more opportunities for people to get involved in software, leveraging those abstractions, and leveraging those additional layers. And I think something that almost always holds true is that if you can do more, you do more, right? So if you can do more, you don't do less. You usually do more. So the second that you can ship that feature faster, great. We've got a backlog that we've never been able to get to, and we've got 30 things on it. And by the time we finish 5, we have 30 more that we want to do. And so if we can keep pumping out these experiences for customers, faster and faster, then, awesome, let's do it. And I think that's where you need to connect the abstraction, what we're talking about here, to the existing organization and help create that bridge. And that bridging of like existing, the bridging of humans to, together is, can always be like one of the most complex things, right? And luckily we have some ChatGPT side to help us now, but in some cases it actually backfires. So be careful with just blindly using ChatGPT. Add a little prompt in there to say, make it sound more lighthearted and, so on. But I do have some questions I want to jump to as we're coming to the end here. We got another one from John. How do you respond to customer concerns about vendor lock-in of using serverless architectures? Paul, you're on with us. I also want to say, for those who don't know, Paul is our new host of the Talking Serverless podcast. And so having him here with us and definitely with me is helping a ton. Shout out to Mr. Paul, and I'll give him the first crack at that.
So vendor lock-in, right? People like to bring this up as if they had a choice, right? It's almost like when you say vendor lock-in for customers when they're really deciding on a platform, you're going to have to modify your existing code no matter where you end up going. You can either do nothing and accept the cost of doing nothing, or try something new and then gain the benefits of the new thing. There are more strategies now that both increase your hooks into AWS and decrease them, right? Like over time, AWS has been shown to like make things slightly cheaper, increase service limits here and there. They haven't walked back on a ton of their services like some of the other like startups or major cloud providers have, right? And so given I used to be in finance, right? And we would say past performance does not guarantee future results, but everybody always assumes like, yeah, what Amazon has been doing, we can assume they will continue doing. And when you're looking at using AWS and you're like, oh no, I'm going to get locked into this thing forever. Think about, what actual components are you really worried about not being mobile, right? Most of the most of what they call like the data gravity of your application is where the data is stored. Like that's the hardest thing to move. So I would always say like if you're worried about vendor lock-in, it's like where are you locked in already? With your database or with your actual stateful data. It's the data in applications that it's actually worth anything. I mean, market's playing that out, right? Everybody wants the data. I think that's where vendor lock-in or platform conversations really should be, is like, where is your data being stored?
Okay. Yeah, that's a really good way to say it. It's like, where are you locked in already? Because I think that's honestly the thing that I think most people aren't looking at. And that's sort of that like sort of narrow focus that we have where we go, this is only a how do we run our stuff on compute problem, and not like a larger organizational problem or siloed problem, or employees don't feel motivated or heard or seen. We're not taking in new things because somebody's gatekeeping all of it. Someone is trying to make sure that the Jira ticket board looks like things are being accomplished just so that they don't get pressure from their boss, and all those problems, and so does serverless solve all that? No, absolutely not. You have to do a lot of work on the side for that too. So I think, when you're thinking about the lock-in side of it, it's basically, what are your goals? Going back to that, what is the goal that you want, right? And what are your requirements? So if you need to run some crazy multi-cloud, multi-region, a comet strikes the Earth, and the website that archives all of the internet needs to stay up, okay, then maybe you have to run on Google Cloud and Azure and also your own physical servers inside of a mountain or something as well. And that's a really complex problem that you're going to have to solve. But also there's another larger thing, which is as this sort of like serverless movement has happened, and I know we're at time now, so I appreciate everybody showing up today and completely. So we'll have to come to a wrap. As it started to happen, and I lost my train of thought as that goes. I think there was a pushback, right? And that pushback came in the form of a bunch of different things, but one of them was vendor lock-in, and the idea that, and I think I won't say it's, I won't use a word as harsh as like propaganda or something, because obviously there is a concern about being locked into a platform. But if you're not doing anything illegal or borderline illegal, or something that has had evidence of being deplatformed previously, then your risk level goes down significantly for running on a single cloud. And especially with the exit ramps that have been created. Previously, the argument around vendor lock-in was much more severe because Lambda only could run through like a zip file, but now they've actually started working on containerization of Lambda, and you can actually make those Docker containers and then bring it directly into Lambda pretty natively now. And so the idea being that you can run it off of the Docker container and then shift it, but all the other downstream things that you do with AWS, you're still going to be locked in on, of course. So I think you just have to step back, look at the entire picture and say, are we trying to roll this out, a new product in the next 6 months? Okay, great. Then let's just stick on AWS. Let's use all the layers possible, because the only thing that defines success for us as a business is potentially hitting revenue or having users. They don't care about what compute running on. They don't care about any other aspects of it. If you're multi-cloud, if you can survive a comet, impact. Yeah, so I think, with that, you have to make your own decision, but yeah. And I think that's a good place to stop. I appreciate everybody for coming on. I think, oh, we have one more here, so maybe it's worthwhile for anybody that can stick a bit longer. We have Ryan, what are your thoughts with integrating LLMs into production solutions? I think, do it carefully and experiment in isolation. Don't open up your entire client data. Don't open up your entire data internally to something that you haven't read all the terms of service and everything else for. Speak to your legal department. Do things in isolation, experiment. But the reason why I said do it is because you don't know what that's going to lead to, right? Innovation is not something that you can just easily predict and say, oh, well, if we move it here, and then move this thing here, then all of a sudden we're innovating on our product. So I think if you have the idea of integrating LLMs into production solutions and trying that, then you should just absolutely go for it, because you're going to understand the nuance of how to do it properly as you get into it. And what does that represent? I don't know. It's in a completely new emerging field. And you could just as easily as I could or Paul could define what that looks like for the rest of us. And so I would say go after it and, be careful. Like I said, isolation, read the terms of service, run it through legal. I don't know. Don't use ChatGPT legal. I don't know if there's like an AI back conversation. They might tell you everything is fine. What are your thoughts on this, Paul? As we're
LLM, like, you just have to have a human in the loop somewhere. Like, you cannot build fully automated systems right now where it's like completely hands off. I mean, that's just kind of it. We might get there. We probably will get there eventually, but right now it needs a lot of care and feeding in order to do something well consistently. And the only way I've found to do that is to let the LLM do as much sort of brainless work you can give it, and then at some point bring a human in to say, yes, this is the final answer.
Well said. Yeah, you need a human in the loop, and especially now, and that's good for us because all of us are leveraging these AI tools now, and we're all looking into how to become even more efficient, how to keep using these new layers of abstraction. And also, there's an interesting side, because we've sort of decided, all of us that are working in the serverless space, that we don't need to not understand, but we don't need to interact with all those underlying layers. I believe we all move a little bit faster in adoption of new stuff too, because we're just like, oh, we're just going to tack that on. And really that just increases productivity, performance, etc. So my thoughts, integrating it in, as Paul said, as well. You know, use that confirmation step, have somebody that's senior enough to understand the output and the inputs that are going in. Yeah, write articles about it, share it out, talk to us in a couple months, get on the podcast, speak to Paul. And with that, I think that's the end of, you know, Coffee with Ryan. It's our first time doing this. I really appreciate the help from Paul here, Jonathan and Tyler, and all of y'all's questions. Thank you, John. Thank you, everybody else. And I hope you have a wonderful Friday. We're coming into the end of the end of March. Yeah, have a great weekend. You know, I don't know. That's it. Thanks, everybody. Cheers.